And have a seat. We're going to be looking at Daniel chapter 3 today. Again, we're looking at Daniel chapter 3 today. So we're in Daniel chapter 3. As I do each week, I want to remind you of the structure we're following so that we know where we're at. The structure of the book is that there are 6 episodes or narratives in chapters 1 through 6. Each chapter is a different episode or narrative that happens in the lives of Daniel and the 3 amigos. And then it's followed by 4 visions in chapters 7 through 12, visions that God gives Daniel. And so we continue through the 6 episodes. We've already gone through 2 of those narratives, chapters 1 and 2, the last couple of weeks. And now we are today in chapter 3. Did anyone get a chance to read chapter 3 before you came today? So some of us did. That's good. That helps. I really want to encourage y'all to read it if you can. Or read the VeggieTales version, whichever one you want to do. You have a medium at this point, so you have an account and you can watch the VeggieTales version. If you want to go with it. We're looking at Daniel chapter 3 today. So I'll give you a moment. You can read chapter 3 as a small group or on the table. If you already read it, just kind of bring your mind and refresh yourself on some of the details, and then we'll begin to take a look at it together. Go. Just a friendly reminder, I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to kind of wrap up some of your initial discussions with each other, and then we'll jump into it as the big group together. Some initial good conversation with each other, just reminding yourselves of some of the details of chapter 3 and Nebuchadnezzar's golden image. We're going to hop into the text together though, as a big group. And so the first thing that I want to point out about where we're in chapter 3 are the differences between chapters 1 and 2, and then here, this episode in chapter 3. We are talking about how to live faithfully in the middle of a context where the majority culture is sometimes tolerant of your religion, sometimes tolerant of your beliefs and practices, and sometimes extremely intolerant, wanting you to change. So Daniel and the 3 amigos have to live as faithful Jews in the midst of Babylon. And in chapters 1 and 2, we had examples of how to do that are pretty sophisticated, pretty nuanced. In chapter 1, Daniel and the 3 amigos basically attend college there in Babylon, and they study the literature and language of the Chaldeans. They are given Babylonian names, and in none of this do they buck the system. They say, okay, if this is what I have to learn to take the test and get an A on the test, I take the test, whatever, fine. And then they allow themselves to be called by Babylonian names, even though privately it seems that they still refer to each other by their Hebrew names. Okay. When they push back is food sacrificed to idols, right? Because then that would be a breaking of the first commandment. So they push back against food sacrificed to idols. And then, but how do they do that? Anybody remember, how do they do that?
Vegetables instead of wine.
They use the system against the system, right? So how do they do that? And yes, you're right, Steve. It has to do with eating vegetables instead of meat. But how do they use the system against the system? Yeah. They ask for a trial run, don't they? Just give us a trial run. And if we're wrong, we'll totally do things the way you want us to do them, right? Instead, they ruin it for everybody because now everybody has to eat vegetables instead of ribeye. I'm sure the other students were very pleased with that. Let's make Daniel class president. He took the soda pop machine out of the school. Thanks, Daniel. In chapter 2, how do they navigate? Remember, that's Nebuchadnezzar in his dream. How do they navigate that situation? Because Nebuchadnezzar makes a threat. Do y'all remember what it was? What's the threat? Tell me his interpretation, or I'll kill everybody. He threw 2 R's in there. He said, I'll kill everybody Because I'm not putting up with the charlatans. I'm not putting up with people who say that they're wise men or sorcerers or diviners and just telling me what I want to hear. I need the information. And so I'll kill all of you if you don't come up with it. Well, what does Daniel and the three amigos, what do they do? Well, they ask for time, but then amongst themselves, what do? They pray. So they go directly to God, they pray, and God gives them the dream and its interpretation, or gives it to Daniel. Daniel speaks on behalf of the group. Okay. But they are still operating in part, at least, by Babylonian culture. I told you that dreams are important to this people back then, but also to people still living in that part of the world yet today. And I told you that God is a loving God, right? He's a loving Heavenly Father, and He speaks to us in ways that we can understand. They don't have the scriptures. They don't have the Torah. They don't have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, do they? No. They're also not going to read those scriptures because they're the scriptures of the people, the Judeans that now they're going to call Jews in Babylon. They're the scriptures of the conquered people, so they're not likely to read those. Are y'all with me? So they're still saying, okay, if God's going to communicate with you in the way that you can understand, then He'll give me the dream and the interpretation to hand you what you can understand. But He's not going into the nuances of scripture with this emperor. Are y'all with me? He's not answering in a way that would be the way Jews would talk to each other at synagogue. He's answering the way a Babylonian emperor understands the world. Everybody with me? Even down to y'all remember the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed had the head of gold, and he said, well, all these are kingdoms. And he speaks about the other kingdom, the kingdom of silver, the kingdom of bronze, the kingdom of iron mixed with clay as kingdoms. But the gold, he says, the gold is not the Babylonian empire, but rather who's the gold head? You are Nebuchadnezzar. See, I'm an idiot. I told y'all. And she did it was his brother. Yeah, okay. Daniel is slick, man. He's politically astute. He's smart. Okay, he knows how to answer a Babylonian emperor in the way that a Babylonian emperor would understand it. But here in chapter 3, we're going into a problem. There is no more wiggle room. You can't use the system against the system, and you can't simply turn back wrath with a well-crafted answer. Do y'all see this? We've got a problem. What's the problem? Nebuchadnezzar wants to what? Okay, well, let's talk about that. You talking about the statue? Okay, why do you say Nebuchadnezzar wants to be God? So let's look at the text. He never an image of gold whose height was this, and this. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, and then he said everybody bow down to it. It sounds like, Vaughn, you may be assuming that's a statue of himself. Is that correct? And that is one common interpretation. So you are in good company, Vaughn. That is one common interpretation. Here's another common interpretation, is that the statue was not of Nebuchadnezzar himself, but one of the chief gods of the Babylonians. It could have been Nabu, it could have been Marduk. Who are these people? Well, here's a water relief of Marduk. Look at him, he's a handsome guy. Look at that majestic beard. Okay, I don't know how much beard balm I go through. How much beard balm does Marduk go through? And what does he got in his hair? That is but if you're gonna do the money, that's the way to do it. That's amazing. That is amazing. I gotta hand it to him. He's one handsome dude. Okay, and he's got the big hat. So he's really important. He's got the big hat. And you know what? We can't make fun of the hat, people. Because our culture did the same thing for a lot of years. Ever hear of a 10-gallon hat? Yeah. You don't have a travel hat, you got a 10-gallon hat. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. Look at that. It just doesn't have the brim on it, but that's a 10-gallon hat. And he's got wings. He's got 4 wings. Okay. So I mean, he almost looks angelic. I mean, this guy, hey, this is You know, if you're gonna be an idolater, this is the way to go. This guy is stylish, okay? You don't like his nose. So Carol says she would swipe left on Marduk. That's what she just said. Says she would swipe left on Marduk. No, I'm not going with Marduk. What kind of name is that? It kind of sounds like the name for a big Great Dane. It's pretty close to Marduk. And second, what's up with that nose? Did I see a It looks an awful lot like a football. Doesn't it? So not only is Marduk stylish, but he is the quarterback of the football team. This guy is going all the way to the Super Bowl. Again, people, I'm not making this up. If you're going to be an idolater, Babylon is a great way to go. All the stylish gods, okay? This guy looks great. Yeah, he's got a new person in the other hand. Speaker though, because he takes his shoes with him so that when he walks on the field, he's got his own walk music. Are y'all with me? Yeah, it's like a boombox. It's an early Babylonian boombox. They have small hamsters in there that play the oud, and that's how you get the music out of the boombox. I'm telling you, it is the way to go. These guys are styling and profiling. So anyway, so here's Marduk. This is in relief. This is an actual artifact. So this is in relief. But a 900-foot statue of this guy. Y'all with me? So it may have been a statue of himself, but it technically might have been a statue of one of the chief gods. It still serves a political purpose, and I'll talk to y'all about that here in just a second. So we got to ask the question, why this and why now? It seems so random. We've been through chapters 1 and 2. There's no time stamp on chapter 3 to tell us exactly when this happened, but all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, it looks like he just got, kind of like he woke up one day with this idea in his head, and he's making the statue and telling everybody to worship it. So we got to ask why this and why now? Well, Nebuchadnezzar, in about the, 11th year, 12th year of his reign, had a major attempt at a coup. There was a major rebellion against his authority that involved government officials. It involved officials. So it was a major attempt at a coup. They were going to overthrow Nebuchadnezzar and replace him with a different emperor. Okay. This was around 594 BC. And we have records from the Babylonian that's where we're getting this from, about the year 594 BC, the way we count. Okay. Why is the Bible put that in there? Because the Bible doesn't care. It's a pagan ruler and he had a problem. It's like a Tuesday. That it doesn't matter. What matters to the Bible is the theological issue that now he's going to set up this idol that everybody's supposed to worship. Are you with me? But we know from archaeological things and we know from archaeological research and from Babylonian records that he had to put on a major attempt at a coup in 594. And when he put it down, and I say he put down this coup, I mean he put it down. He killed everyone who was involved. He killed everyone who didn't know about being involved. He killed the people who looked at the plan and said, I'm not participating. He cleaned house. It was a bloodletting.
And again, I know we're not supposed to really care, but was one of his wives involved? And
I can read that again. You remember that from someone that maybe one of his wives was even involved?
yeah,
That'd be interesting. This episode's getting even better. That's juicy.
I don't know why.
From my study is that it was a major attempt at a coup. It was a big deal. And then when he put it down, he killed a lot of people. After this, he even went out to the Western provinces to collect tribute himself instead of sending representatives and emissaries to collect tribute, because he wanted to be there with his army to remind everybody he pulls up in the Escalade. You know what I'm saying? I pull up in the Escalade with the entourage. You do not. So I'm here personally to collect my tribute. And he went on a tour of the Western provinces, and then he came back to Babylon after that. Okay. This time, after he had brutally cleansed his empire of all the conspirators, he sets up this image, possibly of Marduk. And he says everybody has to bow down and worship. Is this really about God at this point? It is not. Which is why whether the statue was of himself or one of their chief gods, it doesn't really matter, because the intent behind it is exactly the same. The intent behind this is everyone's going to be on the same page, everyone's going to be in lockstep, and this is how you're going to show your loyalty to me and therefore to the state. Else. Because I just put down, and this coup almost succeeded. Like, it was a big deal. It wasn't a small thing. It was a really big deal. So it almost succeeded. And so this guy is shaky on his throne. Y'all with me? So he doubles down. And that's why there's no wiggle room. So when you get to this charge against the three amigos, first of all, let's remember how the three amigos, they by the three amigos. I do not mean Chevy Chase, Martin Short, and Steve Martin. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the weird thing is, you all remember them. Babylonian names, not by their Hebrew names. Why? Because you grew up in Sunday school, and then you read chapter 3 of Daniel, because it's the fiery furnace, and they keep repeating Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And we'll get to that in a minute. Why keep repeating the names? So, when officials, specifically in the province of Babylon, where the statue is set up. So again, when says, Babylon worship, it's not in the full province, and that's where they are. If a new statue got set up in Washington, D.C., these guys are like mayor and city council in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., they say, no, thank you. That's going to look bad. That's not how you go. You didn't show up to the big statue thing. So the charge against the three amigos is that they might not be politically reliable. In the aftermath of something like this coup attempt, in the aftermath of a politically charged moment in the history of this country, everybody's checking to make sure that everybody is on board with the new way of working. Y'all with me? So when there was all the scares with Soviet Russia back in the day, the Soviet Union, what happened in Congress to make sure nobody has adopted those political views? McCarthyism and the McCarthy trial. Do y'all remember that? At least from a history book? Why for years was there a disproportionate amount of Southerners who signed up to serve in the FBI? Do y'all know that? Y'all don't, because you're from Nebraska. So I don't know if you know this, but he didn't even make the TV and movies for a while. Whenever the FBI showed up, it was some dude with a Southern accent. Did y'all ever wonder why that would be? Tell you, it's revolutionary to the great and noble people of the Great Plains known as Nebraskans. Let me share my culture with you. So after the Civil War, and you've heard of that, right? Yeah, okay. So after the Civil War, I don't know if you find this strange, a lot of people looked at Southerners kind of askance. Maybe Southerners can't be trusted because, we don't know what's going on. Shooting you is on the table. Okay. So Southerners decided, a number of Southern men of certain generations after the Civil War who fully took up federal government spots to prove their loyalty to the flag and the Constitution. And that's why for a certain number of generations, a disproportionate amount of Southern men signed up to serve in the FBI. That's a thing. So in the aftermath of this political problem, everybody's looking at this moment in the bloodletting. Are you with me? It's a very tense time. Who will miss in the bloodletting not be fully on board? See these three Jews who won't bow down. And the first thing they say is, aha, we missed three of them. Y'all with me? The statue is meant to reinforce loyalty not to a god, but to the state and to the emperor then. And humor, I think, is hard because humor is often cultural, like what one culture finds humorous, another culture won't find humorous. I don't think anybody in this room, even though you're German, many of you are German descendants, I don't think y'all still speak German, do you? Most of you. So none of you have ever watched like a German comedy movie? Anybody see a German comedic film? Nine? Okay. And some of you are thinking Germans don't have a sense of humor. They do though. It's not great. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not great. But they do have a sense of humor. One thing that I thought was funny as an American, I watched this one German comedy, and one thing I found that was really, really super funny, even though I'm not German, was this guy needed to go talk to Jesus. So he went to a trailer park, and Jesus lived in a trailer park in a trailer. And Jesus stepped out of the trailer park wearing a USA t-shirt. Now, come on, y'all, that's funny. I don't care who you are. That's fun. Jesus wears a USA t-shirt. That's funny. Even I, as an American, was like, oh, I get the joke. That's hilarious. Okay, anyway. So, but humor is often cultural, and so it's sometimes hard for us to catch it. There's a lot of humor going on in chapter 3. What's the humor? It's in places like this. You look at chapter 3, verse 3. Chapter 3, verse 2, going into verse 3. I'll read it to you. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent together the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, and the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they proclaimed aloud. Are y'all with me? All of the and satraps, and he just keeps, and then the image that King Nebuchadnezzar set up. That's fine for Monty Python, realize, because that's where someone's reading the scriptures, and then one of them will say, "Skip it, bro." You know, like that's shit. But the reason that works for Monty Python as a British comedy group from back in the day is because it first worked for Jews. That's funny. Why is that funny? Why is that being recorded that way? It's funny because they're making fun of the pagans. They're making fun of the pagans that they've dehumanized all of their people and turned them into mere cogs in a machine. Do y'all see that? These are no longer people. These are cogs in a political machine. It's like Pavlov's dog. Y'all know the research, about the bell and then the salivating, and when the music goes out, they all go down at the same time. They're completely dehumanized. They have no personal identity. They're just cogs in a machine, and it's like Pavlov's dog. Every time that the music goes off, they all go bowing down at the same time. Daniel is making fun of them. And that may be hard to catch because humor is often culturally grounded, That I'm pointing out, you see it. He's making fun of them. In this empire, your humanity means very, very little. You have to be a good cog in the wheel. It's like so many Russian writers during the Soviet Union and so many Russian composers during the years of the Soviet Union, they made fun of the Soviet Union over the same things. Anybody read any of that literature from that time period or listened to any of that classical music? So I'm thinking of Shostakovich, thank you. Somebody saved me. You redeemed the day. Was that Steve? Steve, thank you for redeeming the day. Shostakovich, like take something like the Fifth Symphony. This is the ninth. I can't remember now. But the symphony, I mean, it's so bad at the end. It's like the anti-Superman coming out. It's so bad at the end. And what's worse is that the Soviet officials at the time that he wrote that and then had it premiered in Soviet Russia, they thought it was great. They didn't realize they were being made fun of. This is Daniel's way when he's recording what happened to him and his buddies during the years of exile in Babylon. This is his way of undercutting them. He's making fun. You robbed everyone in your empire of their actual humanity and made them to be good cogs in your political machine. You've turned them into North Korea. You've turned them into CCCP China. You've turned them into the Soviet Union. You've turned them into this. Are y'all with me? Well, Nebuchadnezzar is mad because the three amigos will not bow. And by the way, when I said that's why you know their names, it's because, and that's also part of the humor. These three are constantly in front of other Babylonians, and they are under pressure from their peers in the political establishment of the Babylonian Empire to acquiesce, to back off of their position. Just go ahead and do what the rest of us are doing. Just go ahead and bow like the rest of us bow. Don't book this. Don't think for yourself. None of it. Just do what everyone else is telling you to do. Be a good citizen, right? Be a good cog in the wheel. And then when they won't do it, Nebuchadnezzar is mad because he just put down a huge rebellion, y'all. It's not like he's just got an ego. I mean, the guy's clearly got an ego. But if you chalk this up to his ego, you're going to be shorting yourself on the interpretation. The guy's scared to death. He thinks he's got to root out anybody who might think differently than he wants them to think. This is that level of control. Because if he doesn't, he'll be dead. And his kingdom goes to someone else. So they keep referring to him as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's part of the humor. It's a dark humor. I'll grant you that. This is a dark humor, but it's humor. Okay? So he's ticked. What's he do? It's got a big furnace. How far does he raise the heat? 7 times. Is that safe according to OSHA? It is not. OSHA is not happy about this. There was a union grievance filed after this. It's in the Babylonian documents, not in your Bible. Or maybe it's just in the well-known uninspired translation of your Bible. There was an OSHA grievance filed after this, okay? He eats it 7 times over. It's unsafe to operate. What happens to the poor guys that get tasked with throwing these 3 in there? They die. That's how, again, an OSHA complaint was filed. Okay. So here they are in the fiery furnace. How are they put into the furnace? Fully clothed, bound up, and they're thrown in, right? Immediately you get this jarring thing because it switches directly to Nebuchadnezzar's response. And what does he see? 4 instead of 3, and they're unbound and they're walking around. Yeah, they're dancing. They're having a dance off. The floor is hot, so you would be dancing. Hot potato. So he throws 3 guys in. He sees 4 guys walking around freely, and the fire doesn't seem to be affecting them. And the king is confused. Okay, what does he say about the fourth guy? He looks like a son of the gods, so he doesn't even look like a normal just dude. That's what we ask Harlan. Who's the fourth guy? Some of you are looking at me with a look.
Didn't VeggieTales say it was an angel?
Didn't VeggieTales say it was an angel? We're looking at me. That's why some of you are pretty adamant. You immediately hopped out there with Jesus. Some of you now are afraid to say it wasn't Jesus because you're afraid of your peers, because this is Sunday school and they just said the name Jesus, which trumps everything in Sunday school. We all know this. The right answer is always Jesus. And now you're afraid to say it wasn't Jesus. Does anyone think it wasn't Jesus, maybe? Yeah.
I was just gonna say that the note in my Bible, in my study Bible, says that there are scholars who believe it was Jesus.
Okay.
So it sounds like there's wiggle room there.
Okay. There may be wiggle room. Okay. Someone else is gonna say something? Yes. Is who in the back? I can't see who that is. Hey, Jennifer, excuse me. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Right. Okay.
But
So for those of you who couldn't quite hear, what Jennifer said is that the quotation given you there is that the fourth man looks like a son of the gods, lowercase g, and plural. Okay, and so she's saying that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is from heaven. Quoting
Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar. Now, does Nebuchadnezzar understand the Bible? Does Nebuchadnezzar pray to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? So is Nebuchadnezzar in a position as a human being to understand the theological depths and nuances of what he might be saying? No. This is if Daniel is quoting Nebuchadnezzar and what he said, and that's the belief, right? Is that he's quoting an accurate quotation of what the man said. All he's quoting is what Nebuchadnezzar said. He's not quoting like the truth or something with a capital T. He's only quoting what was said. What Nebuchadnezzar said was he looks like a son of the gods, which if you're Babylonian is the way you would probably formulate that sentence. So then we have to start there. That's a Babylonian's response. It's understandable. He's a pagan. He's a polytheist. Okay. You're not a polytheist, or if you are, I'd like to speak with you after this study. Try to change your mind. So you're not a polytheist, so you have to tell me then how you're going to interpret a Babylonian's gasp, his like, and he may not completely understand what he's saying, but what do you make of it? That's where we're trying to go here when I ask you, who is the fourth man? Yeah.
Yeah, so you gotta, that's his reaction before he talks to them. So, like, oh, he's the son of the gods, but he hasn't talked to the three of them to know who the fourth person is.
Okay.
So he tells them to come out.
Yeah.
And then they all talk, and then after they come out, he says, blessed, the God of the three amigos who sent his angel.
Okay.
So maybe.
So he tells, so Anna's over here looking for context clues, which is a really good way to read your Bible. And she says that this is before Nebuchadnezzar asked the three amigos to come out. He asks them to come out, and he talks to them and then says, blessed be your God who sent his angel. Now, here's the worst part then. Did they say Malach, which is Hebrew for angel, Or did they say Malach Yahweh? Or they probably would have pronounced it Malach Adonai, the angel of the Lord. Y'all remember the angel of the Lord guy? What's the problem with the angel of the Lord guy in the Old Testament? See, I love your looks. I love y'all. I'm gonna get on a soapbox for 2 seconds. This is why you read your Old Testament. Your Old Testament is your meat and potatoes. That's where all the meat and potatoes is. Go back and read Judges. Read what happens when the angel of the Lord, the Malach Yahweh, goes and talks to Gideon. He tells Gideon, not that God has sent him to say to go do something. He says, I tell you to go do something. And then Gideon offers up a sacrifice to this angel, and this angel accepts the sacrifice. Do angels ever accept worship?
No.
The angel of the Lord does. So did they say angel like angel, or did they say angel like the angel of the Lord was with us? So some scholars say angel, and some scholars say it's the pre-incarnate Christ. It's the second person of the Trinity. It's, you say, give me the sensible answer. Y'all say it. Jesus. See, there you go. Okay, yeah.
Along that line of thinking, though, they're also walking around with him, they're not worshiping.
Yeah,
So we don't see them bowing down to him, you know, walking around.
no, I think that's not the person we would say is the Antichrist. Yeah,
This is before they're thrown in, correct?
swear yet?
Sorry, 17.
17.
Oh, our God who we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king.
Yeah.
So that to me says it's somebody from God. Or that's what they.
Well, if God sent an angel, though, he's still delivering you. I mean, remember how many times God sent the angel of death, and the angel of death kills everybody. That's God delivering you. So I'll leave it to you if it's an angel or if it's the pre-incarnate Christ. And nobody gets thrown in this church for your personal take on it. It's Jesus. That's my personal take on it. And Jesus loves you. Go away.
Yeah.
I'll see you next week.
Lot of implementation. To say, because I heard in anytime the Old Testament, this eternity will actually see the talk.